The basement was nothing like the rest of the cabin. It was sterile, clinical, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. There were tables with leather restraints, medical equipment that looked too sophisticated for a cabin in the woods, shelves lined with tools and supplies, and in the corner, a large chest freezer humming quietly. Marcus laid Amanda on one of the tables, securing her ankles with more zip ties. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, trying to speak through the gag he'd placed in her mouth. "Shoo," he said, stroking her hair. "I know you're scared. They all are at first. But you'll understand soon. This isn't about hurting you. It's about loving you so much that I need to keep you with me forever. The most beautiful parts of you." He walked to a table and began laying out surgical instruments. Scalpels, bone saws, forceps, each placed with careful precision. "I fell in love with your hands first," Marcus said conversationally, as if they were still having a pleasant dinner conversation. "The way you moved them when you talked. The way you typed those sweet messages to me. Your fingers are perfect, Amanda. Delicate but strong. I've been photographing them, studying them. And your feet. The way you walked so confident. The red nail polish you wore on our third date. Beautiful." Amanda was pulling at her restraints, thrashing despite the drugs, making muffled screaming sounds through the gag. "Those parts of you will stay with me always," Marcus continued. "I'll preserve them perfectly. I'll take care of them. Talk to them. And sometimes when I miss you most, I'll honor you by consuming small pieces. It's the ultimate intimacy, don't you think? Becoming one flesh." He turned to look at her, and his expression was serene, peaceful. He genuinely believed what he was saying made sense. "Don't worry," he said. "I've done this before. I'm very good at it. You'll barely feel anything after the first cut." Amanda's vision was starting to blur from the drugs and the terror and the tears. But in her jacket pocket, hidden where Marcus hadn't thought to check, her phone was still on. Still transmitting. Still sending her location to Keisha. Still screaming silently for help that was 90 minutes away. Keisha checked her phone obsessively that evening. Amanda had promised to text when they arrived at the cabin. Then text again before bed. But there was nothing. The first message had come through around 7 p.m. Something's off. Coming home early. And then silence. Keisha tried calling. Straight to voicemail. She tried texting. The messages showed as delivered but not read. By 10 p.m., Keisha's anxiety had transformed into genuine fear. She opened the tracking app she'd installed on Amanda's phone. The location pin showed Amanda at a cabin in the Cascade Mountains. And it hadn't moved in 3 hours. Keisha didn't hesitate. She called Detective Sarah Chen's direct line. Chen was at home, trying to have dinner with her wife, trying to pretend she wasn't thinking about Marcus Dalton for just one evening. But when her phone rang and Keisha Torres identified herself as Amanda's best friend, Chen was on her feet before the explanation was finished. "She went to his cabin. I tracked her phone. She sent me a message saying something was off and she was coming home, but her location hasn't changed. Detective, I think he has her. I think she's in trouble." Chen was already grabbing her keys, her badge, her service weapon. "Send me the exact coordinates. I'm on my way." But it wasn't that simple. The cabin was in a different county, outside Portland PD's jurisdiction. Chen had to make calls, navigate bureaucracy, convince a rural sheriff's department that this was an emergency. The sheriff she reached was skeptical. "You want me to raid a private cabin based on a tracking app and a hunch? Do you know how many false alarms we get from worried friends?" "This isn't a false alarm," Chen said, her voice steel. "Marcus Dalton is connected to 2 missing women in Portland. I have testimony from an ex-fiancé describing behavior that suggests he's dangerous. And now a 3rd woman is at his isolated cabin and isn't responding to her friend. We need to move now." "Connected how? Was he charged with anything?" "No, but..." "Then legally he's just a guy at his own cabin with a woman who went there willingly. Unless you have evidence of a crime in progress, I can't authorize a raid." Chen made a decision that could end her career. "I'm sending you crime scene photos from similar cases in Washington and California. Women who disappeared after dating men who matched Marcus Dalton's description. I think he's been doing this for years under different names. If we don't move right now, Amanda Torres is going to die." The sheriff pulled up the photos on his computer. His expression changed. "How soon can you get here?" 90 minutes if I break every traffic law. I'll meet you with a tactical team. If you're wrong about this, we're both in trouble." "I'm not wrong," Chen said. She made one more call as she sped toward the mountains. FBI. She'd been trying to build a case for federal involvement, and now she needed their help. The agent she reached listened to her summary and put her on hold. When he came back, his voice was grim. "Chin, we've been working a pattern case. Multiple missing women across Washington, California, and Arizona over the past 8 years. Different names, but the suspect descriptions match. Software engineer, volunteers with animals, charming, targets successful women. We think he moves every 2 to 3 years, establishes a new identity, and starts over." How many victims? We've connected 11 disappearances to the pattern. Not all confirmed yet. But Chin, if your Marcus Dalton is our guy, none of those women were ever found alive. This isn't kidnapping. This is serial murder. Chin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What's his pathology? FBI profiler says he has a paraphilia fixation on extremities, specifically hands and feet. Based on evidence from one site we found after he'd moved, we believe he preserves body parts as trophies. There's also evidence suggesting he consumes the flesh. It's an incorporation fantasy. He believes that by literally consuming parts of his victims, they become part of him. He keeps them forever. Jesus Christ. The profiler also worked up his psychology. Childhood abandonment trauma. His mother left when he was 7. She told him he wasn't worth loving, made specific comments about his fingers and toes. Classic origin for this type of fixation. He targets women who represent idealized love, women who seem perfect. Then he preserves the parts he values most. To him, it's not murder. It's preservation. It's love. Chin saw the sheriff's vehicles ahead, parked at a staging area. "I'm here. We're going in." "Chin, be careful. This is our guy. He's incredibly intelligent and controlled. He's been doing this for nearly a decade without getting caught. Don't underestimate him." They assembled the team quickly. Sheriff's Department Tactical Unit. Chin and 2 Portland detectives who'd driven up separately. FBI agents were en route but wouldn't arrive for another hour. They couldn't wait. The cabin was 2 miles up a private road. They'd have to go in on foot for the last quarter mile to maintain surprise. As they moved through the forest, Chin thought about Amanda Torres, an elementary school teacher who'd survived one abusive relationship and had been brave enough to try again. Who'd gone to that cabin believing in second chances. Who trusted the wrong person and now was paying for it with her life. Unless they got there in time. Half a mile from the cabin, they heard it. A scream, muffled but unmistakable. Female. Terrified. Then silence. The tactical team moved faster. Amanda regained consciousness to the worst sight imaginable. She was strapped to a medical table, her wrists and ankles secured with leather restraints that had replaced the zip ties. The basement lights were blinding. And Marcus Dalton was standing over her, talking. He'd been talking for a while, she realized. Monologuing to her unconscious body about their future together. About how much he loved her. About which fingers he would take first and why. His voice was tender, loving, completely insane. "The index finger on your right hand," he was saying, holding up a surgical scalpel to examine it in the light. "That's the finger you pointed with when you were teaching. I watched videos of you with your students. You were so passionate. So alive. I want to preserve that. Keep it with me always." Amanda's mind was clearer now. The drugs were wearing off, adrenaline burning through her system. She forced herself to stay still, to keep her breathing steady. To pretend she was still unconscious while she worked at the leather restraints. Marcus set down the scalpel and picked up a camera. "First, I document everything. Every angle. Every detail. These photographs will help me remember you exactly as you were." He began photographing her hands, her feet, moving around the table with artist's precision. While he was focused on the camera, Amanda tested the restraints. Her right wrist had some give. Not much, but maybe enough. She worked at it slowly, carefully, trying not to move in ways that would catch his attention. Marcus set down the camera and picked up a measuring tool. "Proportions matter," he explained, measuring each of her fingers, each of her toes. Making notes in a journal. "Preservation is a science. You have to know exactly what you're working with." He spoke so tenderly. Like he was planning a wedding, not a mutilation. "You'll never leave me now, Amanda. Parts of you will sustain me forever. When I eat your flesh, you'll become part of my body. We'll be together in the most literal sense. Isn't that beautiful?" Amanda's wrist slipped another millimeter through the restraint. Her skin was tearing, blood making the leather slick. The pain was sharp, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she still had a chance. Marcus returned to his instrument table, his back to her. He was selecting tools, laying them out in order. Scalpel first. Then a bone saw for the joints. Then forceps. Antiseptic to prevent contamination of the flesh. He was explaining each one like a chef describing a recipe. Amanda got her hand free. She stayed perfectly still, knowing she'd only get one chance. She needed him distracted. Needed the right moment. She watched as Marcus turned to a small refrigerator, pulling out ice packs for preservation. As he bent down, his back fully to her, Amanda moved. She grabbed a scalpel from the tray beside the table, cut through the restraint on her left wrist. Her hands were free. She reached down for her ankles just as Marcus turned around. His eyes went wide. Amanda, no. She slashed at him with the scalpel, pure survival instinct. The blade caught his forearm, opening a deep gash. Marcus screamed, more in surprise than pain, stumbling backward. Amanda cut her ankle restraints and rolled off the table. Her legs were weak from the drugs and the restraints. She fell immediately. But she forced herself up, forced herself to move. The stairs were right there. Freedom was right there. Marcus recovered faster than she'd hoped. He grabbed her ankle just as she reached the bottom step. They struggled, Amanda kicking with everything she had. She connected with his face, felt his nose crunch under her heel. He released her with a howl of pain. Amanda scrambled up the stairs, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode. She could hear Marcus behind her, pursuing, no longer speaking in that calm, loving voice. Now he was enraged, the mask completely shattered. He was making sounds that weren't quite human. Guttural. Animalistic. She made it to the main floor. The front door was locked, needed a key she didn't have. She ran for the bathroom, the only room with a lock. Slammed the door and engaged the deadbolt just as Marcus hit it from the other side. Amanda, he screamed, pounding on the door. You're ruining everything. We were supposed to be together. This was supposed to be beautiful. The door wouldn't hold long. Amanda looked around desperately. The window. Small but maybe big enough. She grabbed a heavy soap dispenser and smashed the glass. The cold night air rushed in. She could hear sirens in the distance. Or was she imagining them? Wishing them into existence? Help! She screamed through the broken window. Someone help me. Marcus broke through the bathroom door, the wood splintering around the lock. His face was covered in blood from his broken nose. His forearm was still bleeding from the scalpel wound. He looked like a monster now, all pretense of humanity gone. Amanda was halfway through the window, the broken glass tearing her clothes and skin. Marcus grabbed her legs, pulling her back in. She kicked and screamed and fought with everything she had. If I can't have you, Marcus snarled, pulling out a hunting knife from his belt, I'll have this. He raised the knife toward her exposed ankle. Was going to cut off her foot right there, take his trophy even if he couldn't have the rest of her. And that's when the night exploded with sound. Police sirens. Multiple vehicles. Tactical team shouting commands. Flashlights cutting through the darkness. The entire forest lit up with red and blue lights. Marcus froze, the knife still raised. His head snapped toward the front of the cabin. His expression transformed from rage to shock to something that looked almost like relief. They're here, he whispered. Then louder, they're finally here. Amanda didn't understand. Didn't care. She pulled herself the rest of the way through the window and fell 8 feet to the ground below. Landed hard, her ankle twisting painfully. But she was outside. She was free. She ran toward the lights, toward the voices, screaming for help. Behind her, Marcus Dalton stood in the bathroom, surrounded by blood and broken glass and the ruins of his perfect plan. He still held the knife. He could run. Try to escape through the back. He knew these woods. Or he could finish what he started. Take one trophy before they took him. For a long moment he stood perfectly still, listening to the tactical team breaching his front door. Listening to Amanda Torres sobbing in the arms of the police officers. Listening to his carefully constructed life collapsing around him. Then Marcus Dalton smiled, dropped the knife, and walked downstairs to his basement workshop. To the freezer in the corner. To the evidence he'd kept because he couldn't bear to part with the women he'd loved. When the tactical team found him 2 minutes later, he was sitting on the floor, surrounded by vacuum-sealed packages, each labeled with a name and a date. He was crying. Not because he'd been caught, but because he'd finally have to say goodbye. I just wanted to keep them forever, he said as they handcuffed him. Was that really so wrong? Detective Sarah Chen stood in the doorway of that basement workshop, looking at the shelves of preserved human remains, and thought about all the families who'd been waiting for answers. All the women who'd disappeared without a trace. Yes, she said quietly. It was. If this story is affecting you, if you're thinking about the Amanda Torreses of the world who barely escape, or the Jessica Morrisons and Rachel Kims who didn't, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We cover cases like this because they matter. Because understanding how predators operate can save lives. Because the more people who know the warning signs, the fewer victims there will be. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story isn't over yet. And here's my question for you. Amanda's friend Keisha installed that tracking app without permission because her instincts told her something was wrong. It literally saved Amanda's life. But it also violated privacy and trust. If you were in Keisha's position, would you have done the same thing? Would you risk damaging? The tactical team breached the cabin at exactly 11:47 p.m. They'd heard Amanda's screams from outside, heard the sound of breaking glass, heard a man's voice, enraged and desperate, shouting things that made seasoned officers' blood run cold. The front door came down with a single hit from the battering ram. The team poured in, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found Amanda Torres in seconds, collapsed on the ground outside the bathroom window, bleeding, her ankle twisted at a wrong angle, but alive. So incredibly, miraculously alive. Inside the bathroom they found Marcus Dalton. But he wasn't fighting, wasn't trying to escape. He was just standing there, looking at the tactical team with an expression that was almost peaceful. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. Like some part of him was relieved it was finally over. The sniper positioned outside had a clear shot through the bathroom window. Detective Chen heard him in her earpiece. "I have the target. Clear shot. Waiting for authorization." Chen made a decision in half a second. "Negative. Take him alive. We need him alive." Her partner looked at her like she was crazy. "Chen, he was about to kill her." "He's the only one who knows where the others are," Chen said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. 11 women. Maybe more. Their families deserve to know what happened. They deserve to bring their daughters home. We need him alive. The tactical team moved in fast. Marcus didn't resist. Didn't fight. He let them tackle him to the ground, let them cuff his hands behind his back. But as they dragged him out of the bathroom, past the broken door and the blood on the walls, he started talking. Not screaming. Not pleading. Just talking in that same calm, rational voice he'd used on all his dates. "You don't understand," he said. "None of you understand. I was preserving love. That's all I've ever wanted. To keep love from fading. To make it permanent. Isn't that what everyone wants? To make beautiful things last forever?" One of the officers told him to shut up. But Marcus kept talking as they dragged him through the cabin, down the front steps, toward the waiting patrol cars. "I loved them," he said. "Every single one of them. More than they'd ever been loved before. I gave them immortality. I made them part of me forever. That's not murder. That's devotion." Amanda Torres was on a stretcher by then, paramedics working on her injuries. She was going into shock, her body shaking uncontrollably. But when she heard Marcus's voice, she turned her head to look at him. And what she said next would be quoted in every news report about the case. "You didn't love me," Amanda said, her voice hoarse from screaming but steady, strong. "You loved the idea of owning me, controlling me, consuming me. That's not love. That's obsession. And I'm still here. You didn't win." Marcus stopped walking. The officers had to physically move him. He was staring at Amanda with an expression that was heartbreaking in its genuine confusion. Like he truly couldn't understand why she didn't see things his way. As they loaded him into the patrol car, one of the paramedics examining Amanda called out to Detective Chen. "She's missing 3 toes. Left foot. Clean amputations. Recent." He must have worked fast. Chen felt sick. Minutes. They'd been minutes away from Amanda losing more. Or losing everything. But they'd made it. She was alive. And Marcus Dalton, or whatever his real name was in custody. Finally. Amanda gave her statement right there, still on the stretcher, refusing to wait until she got to the hospital. She needed to say it while it was fresh. While the terror was still sharp enough to make every detail crystal clear. "There's a freezer in the basement," she told Chin, her teeth chattering from shock and cold and trauma. "He showed it to me. He was proud of it. He said that's where he keeps them. All of them. The parts he loved most." Detective Chen had been a cop for 15 years. She thought she'd seen everything. But walking down those basement stairs, toward that industrial freezer humming in the corner, she felt her stomach turn in a way it never had before. They opened it at 12:34 a.m. The crime scene photographer documented everything. The forensic team began the careful process of cataloging evidence. And Detective Sarah Chin stood there, looking at the contents of that freezer, and thought about the families who'd been searching for answers for years. The freezer contained 47 vacuum-sealed packages. Each one professionally preserved, the kind of technique you'd use for long-term food storage. But these weren't food. Not originally. Each package was carefully labeled with a name, a date, and a description of contents. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost artistic. Jessica Morrison. March 14, 2019. Right hand, fingers 2 to 4. Left foot, toes 1 to 3. Rachel Kim. November 19, 2019. Both hands complete. Right foot, toes 2 to 5. The forensic team counted 11 different names. 11 women who disappeared over 8 years across 4 different states. 11 victims that Marcus Galton had reduced to carefully preserved body parts, stored in his cabin freezer like trophies. But that wasn't even the most disturbing part. On the shelves surrounding the freezer, investigators found journals. Leather-bound, expensive, the kind you'd use for something precious. Each journal was dedicated to one victim. Inside were detailed entries describing every date, every conversation, every moment Marcus had spent with them. He'd written about their laughs, their smiles, their quirks. He'd documented what he loved about each part of their body he'd chosen to preserve. Jessica's index finger was perfect. One entry read. She gestured with it when she was excited about something. So animated. So alive. I've preserved it exactly as it was that last night. Sometimes I hold it and remember the way she pointed at the stars, telling me about constellations. She's still teaching me. She always will be. The entries read like love letters. Devoted. Obsessive. Completely insane. But worse than the journals were the recordings. Marcus had videotaped himself talking to the preserved remains. Hours and hours of footage, stored on hard drives in a temperature-controlled cabinet. The forensic team watched them with growing horror. In the videos, Marcus would take out specific packages, carefully unwrap them, arrange the preserved fingers or toes on a velvet cloth, and then he'd talk to them, have conversations as if the women were still there, still listening, still loving him. Hi Jessica. I missed you today. Work was difficult, but I came home to you like I always do. You make everything better. You always have. Pause as if waiting for a response. I know. I miss our conversations too. But we're together. We'll always be together. In his mind, they were still his girlfriends. Still in relationships with him. The fact that all he had left of them were severed body parts didn't register as wrong. To Marcus, he'd simply found a way to make love permanent. The kitchen told its own horrific story. The forensic team found cooking equipment, specialized tools for preparing meat. Recipe books with handwritten notes in the margins. Jessica pairs well with rosemary and garlic. Rachel was best simply seasoned with salt and pepper. Amanda would have been, the notes stopped there, unfinished. Marcus hadn't just kept his victims. He'd consumed them. Literally. It was the ultimate act of incorporation in his twisted psychology. By eating their flesh, he made them part of his body. They would be with him forever. Inside him. Sustaining him. One of the FBI agents who'd arrived during the raid sat down hard on the stairs when he understood what he was looking at. Jesus Christ. He really believed he was preserving love. While the forensic team processed the basement, the FBI ran Marcus Galton's fingerprints and DNA through every database they had. What came back confirmed what Detective Chen had suspected for months. Marcus Galton wasn't his real name. It was Marcus Bergen, wanted in Washington state for questioning in 3 disappearances between 2015 and 2017. Before that, he'd been Mark Davidson in California, connected to 4 missing women between 2011 and 2014. And before that, Martin Donnelly in Arizona, where 2 women had vanished in 2010 and 2011. Each identity was carefully constructed. He'd spend months establishing a new life, a new job, a new background. He'd volunteer in the community, make friends, build credibility, and then he'd start hunting. The pattern was always the same. Software engineer, animal shelter volunteer, dating apps, charming, patient, perfect, 4 or 5 dates to build trust, then an invitation to somewhere private, and then the women would disappear without a trace. He'd been doing this for nearly a decade. 11 confirmed victims, possibly more in the years before he perfected his technique. And he'd never been caught because he was meticulous. He cleaned crime scenes with professional-grade chemicals. He disposed of the majority of remains in ways that prevented discovery. He kept only the parts he treasured most. And he moved frequently enough that no single jurisdiction could build a pattern. But now they had him. Now they had everything. The evidence was overwhelming. Undeniable. Marcus Bergen was going to prison for the rest of his life. As they led him out of the cabin toward the transport vehicle that would take him to county jail, Marcus looked back at his cabin one more time. At the place where he'd kept his collection. where he preserved his version of love. "They're still there," he said to Detective Chin. "In the freezer. Promise me you'll take care of them. They can't be alone. They're waiting for me." Chin didn't respond. She just watched as they drove Marcus Bergen away, his delusions intact, his mind still refusing to accept the reality of what he'd done. The families would finally get answers. The victims would finally get justice. And Amanda Torres would spend the rest of her life knowing she'd survived something that 11 other women hadn't. But first they had to identify all the remains, contact all the families, break the news that their missing daughters, sisters, mothers weren't coming home. Not whole. Not alive. Just pieces preserved in a monster's freezer. Detective Sarah Chen made those calls over the next 3 days. 11 phone calls that destroyed 11 families all over again. But at least now they knew. At least now they could grieve with certainty instead of hope. The trial of Marcus Bergen began 6 months later, in May of 2021. It was a national sensation from the first day. Court TV covered it gavel to gavel. Every major news outlet sent reporters. The courtroom was packed with family members of the victims, journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and people who just couldn't believe a human being could do what Marcus Bergen had done. The prosecution had the easiest case they'd ever presented. They had physical evidence. DNA. Victim remains. Journals. Videos. They had Amanda Torres's testimony. They had forensic evidence from the cabin. They had Marcus's own recorded confessions, his detailed documentation of his crimes. The defense knew they couldn't argue innocence. Instead, they went for an insanity plea. Their entire strategy was built around one argument. Marcus Bergen genuinely believed he was preserving love. He didn't think he was committing murder. In his mind, distorted by childhood trauma and severe mental illness, he was creating immortality. He was making love permanent. He was doing something beautiful. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the defense attorney said in her opening statement, "you're going to hear horrific things in this trial. You're going to see evidence that will disturb you, disgust you, keep you awake at night. But I ask you to remember that Marcus Bergen is a deeply damaged human being who genuinely does not understand that what he did was wrong. He needs treatment, not punishment. He needs help, not hatred." The prosecution's opening was more direct. Marcus Bergen is a serial killer who murdered at least 11 women over 9 years. He dismembered them. He ate them. He kept parts of them like trophies. He documented everything because he was proud of what he'd done. And he would have kept killing if we hadn't stopped him. This isn't insanity. This is evil. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness took the stand. Forensic experts explained the preservation techniques. FBI profilers described Marcus's psychology. Family members gave victim impact statements that left the entire courtroom in tears. But the moment everyone was waiting for came on day 12, when Marcus Bergen took the stand. Against his lawyer's advice, against every legal strategy that might have saved him from the harshest sentence, Marcus insisted on testifying. He wanted to explain, to make people understand. And what he said was more chilling than anything anyone had imagined. Marcus sat in the witness box in a suit and tie, looking exactly like the successful software engineer he'd pretended to be. Handsome, well-groomed, completely sane by all outward appearances. And he spoke calmly, rationally, about murder and cannibalism and mutilation like he was describing a hobby. "I loved them," he said, his voice clear and steady. "Every single one of them. More deeply than most people ever experience love. I wanted to know them completely. To understand every part of them. And I couldn't bear the thought of them leaving me like everyone else had left me." The prosecutor asked him about his mother. About the abandonment when he was 7 years old. Marcus's face tightened slightly. "She told me I wasn't worth staying for. That even my tiny fingers and toes couldn't make her love me enough to stay. I was 7 years old. I watched her pack her bags and walk out the door and I never saw her again. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you understand the hole that creates?" "So you filled that hole by murdering women?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Marcus said, frustrated. "You're not listening. I didn't murder them. I preserved them. There's a difference. Murder is ending something. I was making it eternal. Every woman I chose because she was perfect. Because she represented everything beautiful in the world. And beauty fades. Love ends. People leave. Unless you find a way to make them stay. By cutting off their fingers and toes? By keeping the parts of them that I loved most?" Marcus corrected. "The hands that touched me. The feet that walked toward me. The physical representations of their presence in my life. I preserved those parts with the same care that people preserve wedding dresses or love letters. What's the difference? The prosecutor stared at him. The difference is consent. The difference is that those women wanted to live. They wanted to keep their body parts. Marcus looked genuinely confused. But they loved me. They told me they did. On every date and every message. They wanted to be with me. I just found a way to make that permanent. Even though they screamed? Even though they begged you to stop? They were scared, Marcus admitted. They didn't understand at first. But I explained it to them. I told them that this way we'd never be apart. That they'd always be with me. That's love, isn't it? Being together forever? The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorneys looked disturbed by their own client.